Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Strong Stoic Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Tumblin, and I got a heavy topic for you today. I suppose I've been doing a few heavy topics lately. Well, this one's heavy, so brace thou self. Thou self, that's a weird thing to say. Anyways, I'm going to talk today about grief and how to grieve like a Stoic. And, grief is one of the more challenging emotional states that we have to deal with as human beings. It occurs after losing something or someone that we've valued. That's very important to us. Okay, most people think of grief in terms of a person, right? Someone that you've lost that means something to you. And it's a certainty that you will experience grief at times in your life, unless you die really young, which is very unfortunate as well. It's very likely that you're going to experience some form of grief throughout your life. And personally, I've always had a great role model for this, and I'll tell you about her later. But today's topic is on grief and the best way to deal with it. Before I get into the topic, let me mention my Patreon. If you're a supporter of mine, check me out on my Patreon. You can give me $5 a month, which would help me out with my podcast costs, which are significant. And through that, you'll actually get early access to all of the episodes. So you'll get about a week early access to all of the podcast episodes. So that's great as well. Also, check me out on Medium. Give me a follow on there. I would really appreciate that. That would help me out a bunch. You can read my articles on there for free, or you can sign up using my affiliate link as well, which would be very helpful to me. Thank you very much. Moving on to the topic. I had a wonderful role model on dealing with death, as I mentioned earlier. I was fortunate as a kid to have several great role models, actually. But one was my great-great-aunt, Mabel. That's right, two greats in there. She lived to be 100 and I think just shy of 103 years old. She might have made it to 103. I can't quite remember. And she was just a wonderful, wonderful woman. She lived with my Uncle Calvin, and they were a fishing family, just like ours were, generations and generations of fishing families, all leading to a podcaster. Interesting, isn't it? But anyways, they were retired when I was growing up, of course, because they were my great-grandmother's generation. And so they would have been retired when I was growing up. But, they suffered great loss in their life. They had a son who lived to be, I believe, in his 40s to 60s. I wasn't really around for that, but they lost their only son before his time. And they had to bury their only child, and also with no grandchildren either. So a bit of a tough situation to be in. I mean, you never really want to lose your child, and that's something that destroys a lot of people permanently, losing a child. And the reason is because, your legacy is gone. The natural order of things have sort of fallen apart when you lose a child. So, generally speaking, you find a partner, you have a child together, you raise a child, and then you die. And they have children, and that's sort of the continuation of the generations and the legacy. And so when you lose a child, it disrupts the natural order of things. And in fact, if you've ever spoken with someone who's lost a child, they'll say that it's not right. There's something not right about this. This is not how it's supposed to be. Okay, and it's a very, very difficult thing to deal with. Anyways, years later, my Uncle Calvin passed away, of course. So it was basically just leaving my Aunt Mabel alone, my poor Aunt Mabel alone. And I didn't really see how she dealt with the loss of her son. I wasn't born at the time, but I've heard stories, and I did get to see how she dealt with the loss of her husband, Uncle Calvin. Now, understand that they were together for like 80 years, right? Like, think about that, 80 years. That's you can't even fathom how long that is. Most people don't even live to be 80 years old. They were together for 80 years. And they had their disagreements like everyone else, and we would witness that to our, let's say, comedic benefit. But they stayed with each other through everything, through thick and thin, through times when the fishing wasn't doing so well, to times when it was doing well, through times when they lost their only son and the other family, and so on. They stayed with each other. And I remember them one time arguing about their ages. They were arguing about which one was 90. Am I 90 or are you 90? And it's a story that always stays with our family. But Anyways, when Uncle Calvin passed away, my Aunt Mabel was, I believe, 99, 98, 99. And we buried him, and we had a funeral, and she grieved. My poor Aunt Mabel, she cried. She didn't hold back. She didn't cry any more dramatically than her genuine grief permitted. But, something really crazy happened after, and not too long after. My dear, strong Aunt Mabel got back to life. She sat with friends. She went out on the deck to watch nature. She joked around like she always did. She giggled. She was goofy. So back to life for my Aunt Mabel didn't mean getting back and doing another career or, accomplishing something or becoming more proficient at a particular passion at the age of 98, 99. Getting back to life meant being present, watching nature, joking around with her friends, welcoming her friends in to have a cup of tea. And, it's worth noting that she spent her whole life on these islands where I'm from. She spent her whole damn life there. And these are the same scenes that she saw every morning, the same birds she heard singing in the mornings, the same view of the ocean, the same people, the same friends. And after her grieving was due, she went out and she got back to life. There's a popular saying in my family, and we say it a lot. It's not just in our family. It's a very, very popular saying, and it's life goes on. Now, the implication there, life goes on, is that life goes on with or without you. Kevin Hart, the comedian, was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he gave this just beautiful little speech on this. He said, regardless of how I feel and how depressed I am, the sun is going to rise in the morning. And in the nighttime, the moon is going to be there, and you're going to look up, and these days are going to keep on going by. So do you let the days go by and look up, and you wasted a year doing what? Or do you just pick it up? All right, figure it out. Made some mistakes. Life goes on. Sometimes when we lose someone close to us, we feel as though we owe them something. It's almost like we feel like we owe it to them to be miserable, to grieve. Because if we are happy when they're gone, well, isn't that a betrayal? Because how can we be happy without them? We almost feel like it's an insult to them if we choose to be happy, or if we can even be happy without someone that we've deeply, deeply cared about. But I don't think that's right. In fact, I think the best way to honor someone that you've had the privilege of spending some of your life with is by getting on with life. Picking your heart back up. I think about death quite a bit, being a Stoic and all. And if I were to die, I'd certainly expect my family to grieve. I'd expect my mother and my father to grieve. I'd expect my brother and sister and nephew to all grieve. But with time, I'd want them to get on with life. Because life goes on, whether you're ready for it or not. Every morning, the sun's going to come up. And you can be there to watch it, or you can have your face buried in a pillow because you're grieving longer than it's due. I wouldn't want my family to think back on me and feel sad that I'm no longer with them. I'd want them to think back on me and smile and laugh at something stupid I said, or appreciate something that we shared. Maybe a Monopoly game that I lost, or some foolish nights that we had. That's what I would want. I wouldn't want them to think back and grieve. Now, there's nothing wrong with grieving, okay? In fact, it's very natural. It's very normal. And the Stoics understood that. Marcus Aurelius used to cry publicly at his friends' funerals. Seneca is well known to have counseled his friends to not hold back the grief, but to also not give grief extra. Don't be dramatic to cause a scene. Don't grieve extra heavy because people are there and watching. No, you grieve. You grieve as you need to. That's normal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a very natural emotion. I mean, Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world at the time, he wept publicly in front of everyone at his friends' funerals. He didn't hold back. He didn't force out the tears, but he didn't hold back. The key point as well is to not grieve any longer than necessary. Again, life goes on. Life goes on with or without you, no matter how you feel. And so give grief its due, but understand that life has to go on, and you have to go on with it. That's the way. So Stoics, they grieve, they weep, they cry when they've lost someone. It's very normal. For anyone to tell you that, it's a form of weakness if you cry when your parents die or, God forbid, a dear friend, that's certainly not the Stoic approach. If you find yourself in a situation where, you're finding it hard to get on with life, well, understand that it is possible. You can absolutely get on with life. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. But the Stoics didn't promise easy, now did they? My Aunt Mabel went through the death of her only son, at an age too late to have another. She went through the death of her husband, Uncle Calvin, that she spent quite literally like 97% of her life with. And when they died, she grieved. And she wasn't embarrassed about it. She cried. She went to the funeral. We all cried with her. We were there. And it wasn't as if she left the funeral home and then everything was okay. No, she had her period of grieving. But even at the age of 98, she got on with life. She realized on a very deep level that we're not here for that long. Life is very fleeting. It goes by very quick. We're not here for that long. And so, grieve for people that you've lost, but also understand that if you want to really honor their memory, you get on with life. And what's interesting is that, you think back on people that maybe you've lost, okay? And there's a point where once you've finished grieving, you actually start to replace that grieving with happiness. You might think to yourself, well, how the hell could I be happy if someone I've loved is no longer with me? How can I possibly be happy? And, well, what I can tell you is that I saw my Aunt Mabel switch from grieving to happiness, to memories. So when she thought of my Uncle Calvin, when she thought of her son, there wasn't this sense of loss. There was this sense of appreciation that you could even spend any time with them. There's a sense of gratitude for all the wonderful times you've had. And so that's the Stoic answer. You grieve, but the goal is to transition that to happy memories. There's a wonderful psalm lyric that I love that goes, let your house be filled with laughter should I ever cross your mind. And that's what I would want. I'm sure if you think about it, that's what you would want. And so if you want to be a Stoic, and I know there's a lot of misconceptions out there that Stoics are unemotional, that grieving, something like grieving, oh my God, what do you mean you're going to grieve in public? That's not Stoic. Well, maybe you should have a quick look in the history books. Have a look at what Marcus Aurelius did. Have a look at what Seneca wrote about. Grieving is a normal thing. But that doesn't mean you grieve forever. Life goes on, so you go on with it. Appreciate those you've loved. Understand that the relationship that you've had with that person doesn't die when they die. It might feel like it, but just because the person died doesn't mean your relationship with them dies. And so if you've had a great connection with them, those memories should only bring happiness, gratitude, appreciation for who they were. Not sadness that you're no longer with them, but appreciation and happiness for the fact that you had the opportunity to be with them at all. So if you find yourself in this situation, dear friend, where you're maybe grieving a little bit extra, and I understand, but eventually you have to get on with life. And that's the best way that you honor people that you've lost. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it was a great episode for you. I know this was a heavy topic. If you want to support me, check me out on Instagram, reach out to me. I'm also on Twitter, on Facebook. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again so much. Cheers. Until next time.